Welcome to Weaving New Paths, Conversations with Visionaries. I'm your host, Grandmother Sharon Raji Maynard. Each week, we sit with individuals who followed a calling, who turned idea into healing, creativity, and change. Their stories remind us that every dream matters. You matter. And that new pathways are being woven every day. Thank you for joining us. Let's step into today's conversation. Hi, my friends. Welcome to Weaving New Paths, Conversations with Visionaries. I'm Sharon Raji Maynard, and honored to be your host today, and so thrilled to have with me Rinah, Rachel, Galper. So somewhere in the fabric of your life, listener, there is a first whisper, a moment that may be larger than you, that just brushed your awareness and asked to be born through you. What are you doing? Well, our guest today, Rinah, she knows about those whispers. She's listened, she's followed, and in doing so, she's created some amazing new paths. And that's what we want to hear from her today. So I'm really, really excited to be in this chat and conversation with you, Rinah. First question. Tell us about your organization, Joyoushout. Let's start right there.
Okay, well, so Joyoushout for me is a weaving together and in some ways an integration and a culmination of all of the work that I've done for 40 years. Its primary purpose is to support youth and adult change makers,
Mm, mm,
particularly those who are working at the intersections of justice work, healing, creativity, and spirituality. Those are the four rivers that lead to the sea that is Joyoushout.
mm.
We have four branches. It seemed to be a lot of four. So we have four branches. So there's collaboration and consultation, what used to be coaching, and I now call broad spectrum care, which I can explain why I've shifted. And also, we have changemaker classes and community gatherings. And that has been going since 2020 officially, but it really started as our sacred circles in 2018 with the loving help of many.
Wow. 2018 is for me, is another very important moment. It was a year that with my daughter getting a heart transplant, I was able to pick up my work again. So 2018, what happened for you?
So, what happened in 2018, and it really picked up speed at the end of 2019 and into the pandemic,
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
began to really feel the longing for community, the need to be the best version of myself. I think up until then, my question had always been, how can I serve?
mm,
And starting in 2018 into 2020, like that span there, I began to ask myself, what is the best use of me?
mm,
Right? And that is a discernment process, which has really manifested the four branches that Joyoushout now holds. And it also, as with all things that are new and beginning, I came to the end of my official in-school teaching career.
okay.
Spanned a couple of decades. I had been a caseworker, a social worker before then. And I was really feeling the need to be spiritually rooted and not working in an institution. And I needed to forge my own pathway because I did not feel that there was a container that was ideal for me at the time. So I had to forge my own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It sounds to me like I don't know if you know Donna Haynes from New York. She was called the New York Shaw Woman, and she realized that the triple goddesses were not correct: maiden, mother, crone. And it was she'd done the maiden and she'd done the taking care, so mother, and she wasn't crone. But what was she? And she termed that phase of a woman's life the queen of myself. And
Mm.
that's where I hear you did this, you just come to the end, and now where is it that you can bring what you love, what's important to you, into a form which wasn't a form there yet, sounds like.
No, and I think, it's so interesting because starting your own business, as I'm sure you know,
Mhm.
and starting your own anything,
And
exercise and an invitation to being fluid, to being patient, to being creative. Like there's so many lessons that I've learned. And I will say that even though I don't look it, I'm actually 64.
okay.
And sometimes my elders are like, "Oh, you're not an elder. You're still a little kid." I think that part of the shift that I'm feeling now at this point in my life is a desire to really support the next generation.
Perfect. I love that.
Also, to really hold those of us who are my age and younger, like mostly, I would say 30s through 70s. It's a pretty wide span.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many of us doing incredible work, and we find ourselves exhausted and under-resourced and doing really transformative work, but not getting the support that we need. I think part of that is because we're stuck in paradigms which are being dismantled in the world. Like the world as we know it is unraveling. That's
Yes,
what
it is.
apocalypse means, to uncover. So
Yeah.
I think that we are now in this time where many of us have been very focused as individuals, and we now need to shift from the me to the we.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am not as centered on myself and what Rinah wants and thinks as I once was. It's part of maturing and evolving. And I'm now more interested in collaborative wisdom sharing, which is why I love your work, Sharon.
Yeah,
It's all about the web we weave.
it is. It is. In my work, I've worked quite extensively with women who have great dreams that kept hitting walls. And and I started in 89, and a lot of the walls we hit as women were walls other women put there.
Mm,
It
interesting.
wasn't, it was like, why is it that our sisters weren't united together? I mean, that would be one of the basic questions that would be part of a session with a client. What is it? And going back, because I go back and do the back in time work, where women, I often would find the circles of women doing amazing things together until we had this energy called invaders who crippled women. And so I found that women in many, many, many ancient circles made contracts to hide their gifts, pretend they weren't powerful because they wouldn't be targeted, made contracts, not just make up stories, but promises
Right.
with each other and themselves that they would stay small, and that if they saw you, my sister, getting a little bit too uppity, I would pull you down to keep you safe. And so going back to heal those circles, they say we can't change the past. I guarantee you we can change the past and need to. And so, what I'm seeing now in our world is exactly what you're talking of. It's time for us to be the we. And I see it happening, in various ways. It's really exciting. And so, here you are, joyous shouting in the world.
Yes, and that's, by the way, what Rinah means. That's my name. It
No
means
kidding.
Joyoushout. That's right. That was for the name of my business, and also I was given that name when I was ordained in 2013. So,
Isn't that interesting? Oh, that is good. That is great. Well, how is it that you have these four branches? Speak to them again, the four branches.
yeah, so the four branches are broad spectrum care, which includes a lot of different healing modalities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I switched from broad spectrum coaching to care is because
Uh-huh.
really what will change our world and save our world is deepening our care of one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Less concerned about the gatekeeping and the coaching licenses and more about what kind of care do people need and how can I make it accessible. So there's
Mm-hmm.
broad spectrum care, there's changemaker classes for youth and adults.
What does that entail? What does that look like?
So there are several classes that we offer. One of them is called The Dance, which is a creative journey with change. It is expressive arts and meditation and story sharing, and that's been going for 2 years. We also have Engaging Youth Changemakers, which is for varying ages, but really 13 through 22, we can do it. And that's where they get a chance to connect with change makers in their communities. They learn about what is change and change making, what are their superpowers and gifts. And then we want to connect them with folks in the community who are doing work that is inspiring to them and they can create projects.
Love it.
Yes,
Love it.
that's all part of classes. There is one coming up, which I think I talked to you about earlier, Sharon, which was Leaving the Cult, White Work for Our Times.
Tell me about that. That went out in our newsletter.
Oh,
And
thank you.
yes, yes, that went out in our newsletter. So let's explore that. When does it begin?
So it's going to begin on Thursday evenings, 7 to 9. It's going to be 4 classes only, uh,
Mhm.
2 hours each. Of course, we'll get a break. And we'll also do one integrative session, which will be on June 17th. So it'll go straight through May and a portion of June.
Okay.
And it is grounded in my belief that white supremacy is a cult.
Hmm.
And it is a cult that many of us as white bodied folks have been assimilated into. And it's not to say that we don't work hard and that we haven't earned the life that we have. It really, the fundamental guiding question is how do we need to shift ourselves in the world so that everybody thrives?
Hmm. Hmm.
Everybody, and the earth without exception. And so we're going to have, again, 4 different focal realms or, focus areas or points. One will be ancestral reconnection and healing. The other will be reparations. We'll also be doing truth telling and witnessing. And a really juicy one for me, because you don't see it often, is collective dreaming.
I love it.
Yeah, that one is really important because many of us are so engaged in resistance work that we forget to exercise our creative imagination and the power that we have to manifest another world. And collective dreaming is going to help us channel that.
Right. You know what? With all of the marches and protests that we're seeing,
Yes,
that part of that energy change is really, really important. So there's a lot of energy generated. There's a lot of camaraderie generated. There's a lot of talking with each other that normally that doesn't happen. How could that kind of activity that's going on right now, how could that also carry us into a we community?
it's a great question. I was actually just talking about this because we have another class which is actually going on right now, which is called Living an Abundant Life. And I'm doing that, and a lot of these are collaborations with others. It's not just Rinah. But this explores our relationship to time, rest, abundance, and dreaming, and also space.
Mm-hmm.
The subject of the protests, the No Kings protests, and other resistance efforts came up because that is actually a way that we are collectively dreaming together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The downside, or I don't want to call it a downside, the challenge that I think these protests have is that if we don't actually sustain the work, so it's not just about feeling good and getting together and building relationships and holding signs or calling your representatives, all of that is necessary and good. However, if we don't have a consciousness shift if we don't have a really clear understanding of how we got to this moment and why the world looks the way it does, it's going to be very hard for us to evolve.
Mhm, mhm.
And also, I'm not sure that our species will survive if we don't change. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's another issue. I think we're in jeopardy. But anyway, so in answer to your question, just very specifically, it's very important to look at solidarity work that is not led by white people.
Mm,
And
mm,
so, because folks who have been marginalized and minoritized for centuries, if not longer, have an insight into the collective and into liberation that many white people have lost.
mhm, mhm.
And so, one of the questions I ask when we do ancestral work is, what were we before we were this? Right?
Yeah,
Because we didn't
yeah.
get to this moment without having all of our communities and our collective care completely dismantled and destroyed and erased.
Exactly.
Right? Millions of witches burned. And I mean, we know the whole story. And so
Yes.
part of it is we need to learn from those who have a clearer memory of how to be in community and how to care. And we
Mhm.
also need to recover what we have forgotten.
Really true.
Yeah.
The one thing too that in my community, because we work with energy extensively to create the new, which is what we have the ability to do, is that we are by intention going into our quiet places to gather up the energy created from the marches. They're like clouds of energy, of possibility that we, as human beings, souls in a human bodysuit, have the ability to take that energy and code it in a way that we would consciously choose of values, or here's a new farm that's growing to have more food for everyone, or a new economic system. So we're taking the energy that's generated, that's going horizontally, to elected officials and to each other. Hey, that's great. But now let's take it into the building realm of energy, even the pain energy, because there's a lot of pain energy being generated, to be able to scoop that up and neutralize it and use it for good, to bless those and release those who had to experience the pain, but also to make it not a repeating pain cloud, you know?
Well, and I think that that requires that we develop tools to really keep ourselves healthy, emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy, mentally, physically, because we're living in a time where it's so easy to get triggered.
Here we have this energy decombobulation going on everywhere. What do you say about that?
Well, so first of all, one of my teachers, Lama Rod Owens, who's unbelievable, is basically saying that this disruption and unraveling is actually necessary in order to usher in a freer existence and world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So, and also, by the way, for a lot of white bodied folks, what is going on in the world feels new and really, really painful to see what we thought was like, just in our country, for instance, as Americans, to see what we thought was this wonderful democracy being completely dysregulated and destroyed.
mm-hmm,
Well, for folks of color that I work with, they have never had access to the democracy, which we think extends to everyone.
mm-hmm,
So part of what's happening is this incredible uncovering of the truth of what is going on and has always been going on. And so what happens is we become very dysregulated, many of us, because
mm-hmm.
we are under assault on many levels. And if we do not develop an ability to regulate our systems and to stay clear and grounded and focused and heart centered, we will end up reacting to every assault in a way that leaves us exhausted, despairing, and despondent.
Mm-hmm.
So, where I am focusing a lot of my work right now is making sure that people are resourced to do their work, particularly women, but also non binary and queer folk. Definitely. And yeah, so that's what I mean when I say that toolbox. And also, a lot of us have tools that we don't use. We forget to use them. And we forget because we're so triggered and in a state of urgency and fear that we forget how to center in love and use the tools that we have.
So say again, most of us, when we get, I'll say triggered or deregulated, it's all kind of the same thing. Something happens in our world, and for me, it's like it triggers an unknown memory storage, something in here that makes me go like, oh my gosh,
Right.
and we get deregulated. And if we don't have tools, what do we do? What happens?
Well, I think we get reactive and we become fear driven.
Hmm.
We become urgent, which is a very exhausting and unsustainable way to live, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it feels like life and death. Well, for a lot of us, even though it feels that way, and by the way, I just want a little caveat here. There are people all over the world for whom this is life and death right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
The catastrophic suffering in which people are hungry and and thirsty, dying of starvation and sickness and war and all of that. That what I'm talking about is not the folks for whom that is a life and death struggle. I'm talking about a lot of us who are more financially resourced, who are living here or in other Western countries, who are feeling like everything is life and death, when in fact, it's a shift that needs to happen. And we can perhaps lessen the suffering if we make the shift, but the unraveling is inevitable because we are living in systems that actually are not sustainable.
Well, we're living in systems, I call them systems of domination. They have been created by those who are controlled, dominated, and that is their agenda, and they've controlled all parts of our life. That's what a cult does. So it has many faces, but
Yep.
that's what a cult does.
Yep.
And now we're seeing it. It brings to my mind, I don't know if you know the story of the peacemaker with the Iroquois nations, the Confederacy up there, where they were killing themselves for hundreds and hundreds of years, five different tribes. Long story short, the suggestion was that they all agree to the same value system. So the values of, and there's about seven, how they interact with each other, how they interact with Earth, to keep that good balance or good mind, they call it. And when you are out of good mind, you are triggered, and you're out of good mind, you're in reaction and you're deregulated. And their commitment then is to recognize within themselves when they are that, exactly what you're saying, that they then have tools and the community supports their space to get themselves back into good mind as they do whatever tool process and support they need, because it's keeping those who have, will say, privilege, whatever that means to you. We're not in the concentration camps right now, we're not in the war zones right now, but we can then hold an energy and demand an energy as this unravels. This is what's going to we're holding what is going to emerge.
Yes. Well, and I think again, getting back to like in my opinion, the most important thing for those of us, particularly those of us who are white,
Mm-hmm.
we are still in the beginning processes of unlearning our racism that we've been socialized into, the white supremacy we've been socialized into, the individualism. And so it's very important to be in solidarity with Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks and other marginalized folks who are really collectively centered and are able to have those shared values, that deep care, that community structure that can remind us when we've strayed from the best version of ourselves. And those of us who are looking to be in solidarity white folks have to work together, and we have to support and love and help one another to do that deep and awful painful work. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is because we're so individualistic, particularly in the United States, but I think it's also a European descended trait. It's very hard for us to support one another and hold one another because it's always scarcity, it's always competition.
Competition.
And that's why we tear each other down. That's what we believe there's not enough to go around. I mean, these are all the stories. And I have this poem that I wrote that really kind of invites us to look at the contracts we signed with our blood, our lineage, our energy. Look at those contracts and maybe break them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we have that culture of domination requires that there be a separation, fighting against one another. There needs to be of things that lack. There needs to be I'm in charge. I mean, all of those are not basic truths, they're stories.
yep.
So can we break free of those stories? And
Well,
and I think that's what this shaking up. It could have happened a different way. It could have happened a different way. Masses could have wakened a different way, but we weren't there, and either we wake up or go over the cliff, my opinion. And so we needed to wake up, and so we're waking up, being shaken in various ways. It's hard to see, but the experience. How do we take advantage of that experience to move us in unity?
well, and I think it requires a very deep and sustained commitment to liberation. Right.
Hmm.
This is about getting free of the delusions which are in our minds, in our world, they manifest in our world. Like we really have to stay committed to not falling asleep.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
that's what happens when we have privilege and a degree of comfort is we start getting lulled by the things around us and very disconnected from what's happening.
Hmm.
That is a privilege to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And so getting free means that first we do the work ourselves, and then we
Hmm.
have to help others get free.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we have a support system so that we're not doing this alone because this is not a me, it is a we shift,
Hmm.
which I think you know better than most.
So, what I'm hearing from you is that Joyoushout is has all of these branches, but what you're talking to is that's why it has the branches to provide and the outcome differently, and the community differently, and the individual differently, because working together, first of all, someone knows that I'm out of balance sometimes before I do,
That's right.
or somebody else knows that they can hold space where I can't hold it for myself. You know what I mean? We
That's right.
learn from each other in this day and age. I don't sit at your feet and you give me downloads. We can have the downloads, but then there's that space that says, and what emerges for you within you from what I just shared? And then there's that. And then there's that.
Well, and also part of the ancestral work, which is something that is very powerful in a group as well as doing your own work individually, is that our ancestors, in my belief system, are actually still trying to heal.
Yeah.
And there are many of them which actually can be helpful to us.
Hmm. Hmm.
We need to connect with them. We need to connect with our future descendants who are not born but are still in spirit and have things to say to us.
Yeah.
And there are realms of not only teachers and guides here with us in this moment, but also in the unseen world, there are so many energies that are just waiting and wanting us to ask them for help.
Yes,
And
they are.
so a lot of the work is just helping each other to connect with these energies. It's the difference between drawing from like a 90-foot well, like the one in the front of my house, and
Mhm.
from a well with no bottom.
There's no bottom.
Who would not want to do that, right? And
Yeah.
that is why the work is joyous. That's why the joy comes from being aligned and resourced and connected. And the reason why there's branches is because we have our roots in the earth, we have our branches cradling the stars, and we are all bridges between heaven and earth, right? And we are all the branches, we're all the roots, like we're all of it.
We are. That's
Actually,
true.
in Jewish mysticism, the tree of life has many energetic branches. A lot of us have specialties in only some of them,
Hmm.
or we have some of our branches are out of alignment, just like we become imbalanced with our elements, right? Fire, air, earth, and water. Those imbalances impede our growth.
Yes.
So a lot of this work is coming into balance and connection.
Hmm.
Yeah, I feel so passionate about this because
I can tell. Yeah, and you ought to. Because, and I'll tell you, from my experience right now, the opportunities, the possibilities, the door openings, the connections have never been this strong,
yes,
ever in our lifetime on the planet.
yep, we are being called.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, and it's an amazing opportunity. So, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
So the best way to get a hold of me is probably just to go visit the website.
Okay.
I have a social media presence, but the website, I'm a little old school, so it's got everything on there. So just go to joyoushout.com, which is spelled Joyous, joyous,
Mhm.
Hout.com. It's like Joyous Shout with one S. Don't
What
forget.
on this?
Don't forget that. And you'll also see my name, Rinah Rachel Galper. You'll see that, and that will guide you to Joyoushout. And then you can get my email, my phone number. It's all there.
Perfect. This your work is so so important in the work today because when you get shaken, people are looking for those places that they can resonate and hold on to as they move themselves into a different place.
Oh, I
So,
love it.
yeah,
And I'm so delighted to be of service to people, especially change makers who are already doing great work and they just need more support.
exactly.
Yeah, so I welcome them for sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being with us today, Raina. And listeners, I know that what you've gained sparks something within you because you are part of the change. You might find many ways to connect with her, but the website's the beginning point, right? So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
So, listeners, if this episode touched you, please share it within your communities with your friends because each share creates a ripple into the larger weaving that we're all creating together. And
that's right.
then join us next time as another visionary will step forward to show how she illuminated a new way.
Oh, I love it.
It is getting done. Thank you so much.
Uh,
Love what you're doing. And to our valued listeners, thank you for being with us here in the sacred space of sovereignty, inquiry, and inspiration. As you explore our guests' work, may you also feel the quiet stirring of your own gift, asking to come alive. The world is shifting, and your unique thread of weaving is essential in that great tapestry. If this conversation nourished you, inspired you, pass it along to others who are seeking hope, direction, and also dreaming a new world into being. We invite you back for the next episode of Weaving New Paths, where together we will continue opening the doors to new ways of seeing, being, and collaborating. Until then, blessings.